Just before we get going on that, I know you guys are a new group this week. I just want to kind of review some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. We talked about how a new religion was created on the Arabian Peninsula. Who could tell me some of the geography of the Arabian Peninsula? Brady? Mostly desert because it lacks streams, rivers, lakes, so it's mostly a desert. What were the nomadic people that lived there referred to as? Bedouins, and they were nomads, and they searched around looking for mainly water and food. Who was the last prophet that created Islam? Muhammad, very good. He was born in Mecca, orphaned at age 6, and then married a wealthy widow woman. And then he received some revelations from an angel named Gabriel. And Muhammad was told by the angel Gabriel that these revelations are the last revelations of God, and he will be the last prophet. And he wrote down all those revelations into a book. And what's that book called? Somebody else. What's the book that Muhammad wrote the revelations down in? Emily. Didn't watch the video? Michaela? The Quran. Very good. Thank you. So he began meditating in the hills, thinking about, because he was bothered by the greed that was existing between the greedy people and the people who were honest. And so he gets all this stuff written down, and then he goes out and he wants to spread the word. And how successful was he at first in the city of Mecca? Was he successful or unsuccessful in spreading his message? Go ahead, Ethan. He wasn't very successful at first. He only had 30 followers in the first 3 years. And so he felt really discouraged because he let down Allah or God. And so then he goes on a hijrah. He goes on a journey to Medina, which is a Bedouin place, a place where Bedouins it's like a pit stop for them. And he begins to convert them in great numbers. He has great success there. Then he returns to Mecca with the following of 10,000 people and converts all those people to Islam in Mecca. He forces them to. So that's how Islam gets its beginnings and its origins from Muhammad. There are the foundation of Islam is based on 5 things. What are those 5 things called? Elizabeth, do you know what they're called? No? Sydney, do you know what they're called? Sounds like something you lay your head on at night. Pillars. Very good. The 5 pillars of Islam. And who can tell me what one of them are? Bella, can you tell me what one of them are? No? How come? How come only like 3 or 4 people know this stuff? It's very important. Sydney, go ahead. Prayer, how many times a day? 5 times a day. Brady, what's another one? You got to make a declaration of faith. There is only one God, and Muhammad is his last and greatest prophet. What else? You might think of any others? Just blurt them out. You got to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. How frequently? How many? 1 time a year? 1 time a month? 1 time in your life, and that's called a Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca. Right, Rachel? Fasting during the holy month of Ramadan, which is the traditional month in which Muhammad received the Quran from the angel Gabriel. And one more. Has to do with money. Michaela? Almsgiving. That's right. Give alms to the poor. It's an obligation to give to the poor. All right? So that's a good foundation. There's other guidelines that exist in Islam as well, but that's the foundation. Now, Muhammad, getting into today's things, was a great leader, and he had great success eventually. But Muhammad eventually dies. And when he dies, he did not name a successor. He did not say, okay, when I die, you are taking over for me. No children, no cousin, no brother. He didn't name anyone to take over for him. So When he dies, people begin to, I don't want to say fight, but they want to try to claim his power and take over for him. And a split occurs in the Islamic faith right at the beginning. And that split occurs as a result of Muhammad's death. All right? So, the split that happens, one side are called Sunni Muslims. Chances are, if you are a Muslim today, you are a Sunni Muslim. About 85% of all Muslims today are Sunni. And the Sunni, they want to follow Muhammad's example. They believe that, a true central leadership is not necessarily required, and that the example of Muhammad is all that is needed. And that's about 85% of Muslims. A minority emerges called the Shia Muslims, or some people say Shiite, or the Shia. This is a minority of Muslims today. And they believe that a man by the name of Ali should become the rightful leader after Muhammad's death. Ali. A-L-I. Ali. So that split occurs. And it still exists today. Still exists today. There are Sunni and there are Shia Muslims. And the reason why they split is because Muhammad did not name a successor after his death. Okay? All right, so these notes kind of skip around a little bit, but it's not necessarily chronological, but there's a very important thing that occurs that happens between Christians and Muslims, and it's called the Crusades. And we will discuss the Crusades much, much more when we get into medieval Europe. We'll look at it a lot more. But since we're talking about Islam and the Crusades, so we have to talk about the Crusades. First of all, have you ever even heard of the word crusade? If I say we're going on a crusade, what does that mean? An adventure for what purpose? Huh? Okay, for what purpose? Is there a religious aspect to it? If we're on a crusade? Yes. Okay, so both Christians and Muslims had this crusade. That's what it is. It's a war. It's actually several wars that take place over hundreds of years that are fought between Christians and Muslims. It's not fought between France and Iraq or England and Egypt. It's fought by multiple countries, and each country claims to have a religious side. All right? So these are holy wars. They're fought over a place. And the place they were fought over is referred to as the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Now, what do we know about Jerusalem? Have we spoken about Jerusalem in the past? What have we said about Jerusalem? Why is Jerusalem important? That people are willing to go send armies to fight over it and die for it. Why is Jerusalem an important place to Christians? Why is it a holy place for Christians? Anything happen there? It was where Jesus was when what happened? Born in Bethlehem, crucified in Jerusalem. All right? So, it's the site, he spent a significant portion of his childhood there. It's where, he spent the last week of his life, Holy Week. And it's where the site of his crucifixion. Pontius Pilate sentences him to death. Okay? So it's a pretty important place to Christians, right? The site where Jesus was executed? Yeah, it is. Why is it important to Jews? Do you remember when we talked about Judaism? Did they have anything to do with Jerusalem? How about they built it? It was their holy land. It was their promised land that God told them to go to. And they built a large temple there with Solomon and King David. This is where all those kings lived. Long, long time ago. Is it important to the Jews? All right. It's important to the Muslims because it's the site of which where Muhammad ascended into paradise. That's where he ascended into heaven, Jerusalem. So this city is important and is a central figure to all three of the major world religions that are monotheistic. So it's something that they all feel is worth fighting for, and they do. So that's what Jerusalem is, and that's why it's important. And so the Christians and the Muslims fight over it. Saladin, as you can see by this picture on the left, he was the ruler of the Muslim forces. And during the Crusades, he proclaimed himself to be a sultan, which is like a supreme military leader of the Muslim forces. And Saladin is very successful as he's able to overtake Jerusalem. And to this day, it's still a city that is split in half between Israel and Palestine, two places that claim it for its own. And Saladin is probably best known for destroying Bethlehem and the Christian forces there, burning it down. And in Saladin and Muslim armies had a very distinct advantage, and it was an advantage of the mind, in that when Islamic soldiers were sent into battle, they believed that if they fought bravely and if they died in battle, regardless of how they lived their life or if they were a bad person, they would immediately go to paradise and be greeted by 72 virgins in heaven. Okay? And so they were very motivated to and willing to die for the cause because of this belief system. So very, very motivated soldiers and very, very good soldiers. All right, now we'll talk more about that because it's not just, hey, we're going to go fight for a couple years and that'll be the Crusades. The Crusades last a long time. It's not just Saladin. It's other people who are involved in it as well. And we'll talk more about it when we get into Europe. Okay? Another group of people I'd like to talk to you about are called the Mongols. The Mongols. And the Mongols created one of the largest empires of its day, as you can see by this map. And you get the Holy Roman Empire, how big it was, the Byzantine, we've talked about it, and then these sultanates and Ayyubid dynasties, these are Muslim dynasties. But look at how large the Mongol Empire was. This is like present day, like China, and part of it is Mongolia, named after the Mongols. But the Mongols were unique, all right? They were not Muslim. They were not Christian. They were kind of pagan nomads. And the way in which they lived their lives was not farming and doing trade and agriculture. They lived their life by burning, invading, and murdering and taking what they wanted. And they were extremely brutal in their tactics. Extremely brutal. And the main leader was a man by the name of Genghis Khan. You ever heard of Genghis Khan? He's pretty famous. No? Genghis Khan. Very brutal tactics. He wanted to take his, they fought on horseback. He wanted to show up with his cavalry, soldiers that fight on horses, up to your village or your city and just have you give up because you're so afraid. And he would send a message, in places where they would not immediately surrender to him. Once the battle was over, he would cut all the heads off of all the men and put them on sticks and put them outside the city, rape all the women, enslave all the children. Brutal. Very brutal. And he would send word out to surrounding communities what they're doing, so that when they showed up at those communities, they would just be like, here's our stuff, leave us alone. That's what he hoped for. And it worked. It worked. Like, hey, I don't want to have my head cut off and my woman raped and my children enslaved. Here's some food. So, and as you can see, he was able to spread very quickly throughout Asia, even into the fringes of what are Muslim empires or of Muslim areas. Okay, so they originated out of the Gobi Desert, but they spread into a large area. All right, and that's the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan. Okay, got that? All right, so in these areas, which are predominantly Muslim, like this is what would be formerly Mesopotamia. This is present-day Egypt. This is obviously the Arabian Peninsula. These areas begin to grow and become increasingly more and more Muslim, and cities begin to emerge. Those cities begin to have an important role. Cities like Baghdad, which is in what present-day country? Anybody know where Baghdad is? It's in Iraq, and Iraq is a Muslim country. Damascus, you guys ever heard of Damascus? Where is Damascus? Anybody got a guess? You can take a guess. I won't make fun of you much. Syria, excellent job. Very good. Jerusalem, what country is that in present-day country? Starts with an I. Israel. Cairo is a Muslim city. Egypt. And Cordoba. Where's that at? Probably never guess it. You wouldn't think it. It's in Spain. You wouldn't think of a Spanish city being Muslim, but it is. It is. It was conquered by the, believe it or not, by the Moors. M-O-O-Rs. No E. Okay? Now, these are like the capital cities of the Muslim world, even to this very day. And they're old. They're very old cities. Okay? Now, each of these cities all has similar type of things in them. Every one of these cities has several mosques, and every one of these cities has what's called bazaars. Not B-I-B-A. Not like, that's bizarre. It's not like that's strange. A bazaar is a place, it's a covered market. And this is a present-day, modern covered market, a bazaar. Now, obviously, they weren't going to have glass covered, inside. It's probably air-conditioned. Back in the in the ancient world, it would be covered with canvas or animal skins because it's hot in the desert. And then, if you have meat sitting out, the sunshine and raw meat, they do not get along very well, or fish. So covered markets were very important in these Muslim cities. And every one of them had a bazaar. Every one of them also had several mosques. Which of these two do you think were the center of the city? Some people say mosque, some people say bazaar. It is the bazaar. Isn't that seem strange? You would think that they would put the religious icons right at the front and center. But they put the bazaar. What did Muhammad do for a living? He was a merchant. Trade and business are very important in the Muslim world. Very important. And so the bazaar is always going to be at the center of the city. Okay? A mosque is just a church. It's a place of worship for Muslims. It's an Islamic church. That's all it is. Okay? It's an Islamic place of worship. So, Christians say they go to church or they go to mass. Muslims say they're going to the mosque. All right? All right. Final thing I want to tell you about is the role of women and family. And we're talking about women's roles in the Islamic world a lot in this module. When it comes to equality, men and women were not equal and they are still not equal in many Muslim areas. And they're not all the same. Some are more traditional, some are more conservative, and some are more liberal. But for the most part, men and women are not equal. But they did have spiritual equality. In the eyes of Allah, men and women were equal. Their prayers had equal efficacy. They were both had the same power. So spiritually, men and women were equal in the eyes of Allah.
And students, please pardon this interruption. Teachers, I have sent an email regarding those of you who will have first lunch. All other teachers will have second lunch. But students who have for their fourth period, the following teachers, you will report to the cafeteria, and then at the end of lunch, you will report to fourth period. Ms. Harris, Ms. Jennings, Mr. Laraba, John Moore, Mr. Perkins, Ms. Shepard, Ms. Smith, and Ms. Wood. Those 8 teachers, your students will report to first lunch, and then they will report to your class at the end of first lunch. All other students, teachers will have second lunch. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Okay, so when it comes to, all right, so men and women were spiritually equal, but that was it. Totally male-dominated society. What's a big fancy word?
Tierson, please report to the main office. Craig Tierson.
What is a big fancy word for male-dominated society? It starts with a P.
Patriarch.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ethan. Patriarchal. Totally a patriarchal society. Just to give you some examples of how patriarchal it was, women at this time were not allowed in public by themselves. They had to be accompanied by a male, whether it be their father, their husband, or a grown adult son. Women were not allowed by themselves. Women were not allowed to touch money. Women were required to cover all parts of their body in public. And there's varying degrees of this. If it's an extremely conservative place of the Muslim world, not even your eyes are allowed to be shown. Whereas a more liberal Muslim place, women could show their faces and hands. But that's about it. The rest of the body had to be shown. Men could have up to 4 wives. And that's a status symbol because it shows how much wealth you have, because in order to get a wife, it had nothing to do with love. It had nothing to do with you meet somebody and fall in love. It's all done, but it's out of business. It's a business arrangement. You want to do business with another person, you may take that person's daughter as your wife, and in order to do that, you had to pay that person. And the money or items that you give to the father of that woman is called a dowry. And it's usually very expensive. So the more wives you had, the more money you had to pay. And it was a symbol that you had money, wealth, the more wives you had. Now within marriage, it's monogamous. Adultery is forbidden. Even though a man can have up to 4 wives, they're still married, and so therefore, it's okay in their eyes. But adultery is forbidden. Someone you're not married to would not be okay. Okay? So, and like I said, there's a lot more to the cultural and societal aspects of how women are treated in the Muslim world. But this is just a very basic overview of how it was in the ancient Muslim world. Okay? So do you guys have any questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up for today.